Hello, everyone. My name is Marcella Walsh, Live Content Coordinator at AVIXA, and welcome to the December Digital Signage Power Hour. Today's webinar topic is The Parking Lot is the New Store. This webinar is being brought to you by our series sponsor, StrataCache. Joining us today is Ben Reynolds, Vice President of Business Development for StrataCache. Ben leads business development, go-to-market, and product strategies for walk-based sensor technology. Walkbase is a leading in-store analytics and marketing platform for retailers, QSRs, entertainment venues, and airports to measure, optimize, and personalize the customer experience. He has more than 25 years of experience in applying technology solutions to the media, technology, and CPG industries. In addition, Ben has held executive, business development, marketing, and finance roles with MaxPoint, HookLogic, PRN, and Sara Lee Corporation. Our roundtable discussion will be led by Dave Haynes, founding editor at 16.9. Before I hand over the presentation to Ben, there are a few housekeeping items. For those viewing live, today's webinar qualifies for 1 CTS RU credit. Please allow 5 to 7 business days to view on your transcripts. For any issues, please email webinars@avixa.org. The webinar will be approximately 45 to 60 minutes, and all attendees will be placed on mute. If you have questions during the presentation, please enter them into the Q&A window so today's moderator can address them at the end of the webinar. To access the Q&A window, simply move your cursor to the bottom of your live stream video box to locate the Q&A icon and click to open. Please do not enter questions into the chat window. You will have access to this recorded webinar at avixa.org/webinars within about 5 business days. And now I will hand things over to Ben. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you, Marcia. I appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. And StrataCache is proud to be a sponsor of the AVIXA seminars. It's been a great couple months of doing everything virtually. So we're glad to be here. What I thought I'd do is just share a little bit of some of the things we're seeing regarding this topic in the industry. And just look at kind of some of the things that are out there and some of the challenges we see, and I'll be really brief. So one of the biggest challenges we see is basically the merchants, customers want to feel safe, and then this idea that merchants are really tasked with managing occupancy. For instance, in Europe right now, as things start to open back up, I think France and Belgium are requiring retailers to report on occupancy levels and how many people, and also obviously maintain capacity. So, customers don't know what to do is another big equation. When they arrive at a location for pickup, where do they go? What happens next? The third biggest challenge is obviously effectively manage queue, and then finally, order accuracy. So just looking at the first problem of kind of managing the occupancy, and I show a picture of a lineup in the early days in the US of, I think it's outside of a Walmart, but just, how do we manage occupancy real time in a store? And there's certainly solutions out there. Technology and digital signage is a great way to communicate with your customers, helping them feel safe, but also providing them information. We're starting to see a lot of solutions come forward with these type of occupancy management, and we've seen those all over the world. The second thing is, I've ordered online, and where do I go next? When I get to the store, and this is where we're seeing a lot of changes in retail and the QSR industry as well. You're starting to see format changes, certainly the static signage, but using mobile is a key part of it. And then also, we're just starting the infancy of seeing digital signage and communication really at the point of pickup. And we see a lot of opportunity there. The next problem is, okay, now I've got all these people in the queue. How do I manage it? And how do I know where people are in the queue, how far away they are? What they're doing next. And so there's definitely technology and solutions that can help manage and bring those back-end type things to the customer, to the retailer, so that the customer experience is enhanced and you're valuing my time. And then the final challenge is order accuracy. So I've got all these things happening. My curbside pickup is up 300%. How do I staff for that? How do I make sure my pickup is right? How do I know when my customer is happy and completed. So those are just a few of the things that Stratocast has seen as a marketing technology in the industry. And I just wanted to share a few initial thoughts on that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David and go from there.
Hi, everybody. It's Dave Haynes here. If you don't know me, I write a blog called 69. I've been doing that for very, very long time now. It's about digital signage and has a lot of readership. And I spent a lot of time talking to a lot of different companies about what's going on in the marketplace. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of get into today was the challenges that are being faced in the digital signage realm for retailing. But before, I just remembered I was supposed to be talking about this. There is a conference next week called Design, and it's co-sponsored by AVIXA and the Digital Signage Federation. 2-day conference, free of charge, all virtual, of course. There's, oh Lord, about 8 sessions per day. And in the evening, one night, there's a online trivia contest. And the second night, there's an online networking session that I'll be hosting. So registration is still open for that. The Mixer happy hour has its own registration, so you probably need to register fairly quickly if you want to get in on that one. So jumping into the topic at hand today, parking lot is the new store. I think we're all pretty tired of talking about COVID, but this is one of these things that has come up because of COVID, but I don't think it's going away just because COVID exists now. So we've got a great set of panelists today. The first one is Ben, who's staying with us for this. Then we've got Rob Avery from Scala. We've got Brian McClymans from Peerless AV, Ivy Dixon from SageNet, and Daniel Sosa from Movic, all the way from Portugal. So I'll start with Ben, but I'd like to hear from all of you about this. What are you seeing out there? What's happening in retail? There's a lot of chatter about this, but I'm curious what's real and what's just chatter.
You know, we're definitely seeing, I mean, you can see it in the statistics, right? In terms of retail trips to the store are down. But the average ticket size per trip are way up. And then obviously the curbside or the contactless trips in both QSR and retail are way up. You know, several 100% through 2 to 3x versus prior year. So that's what we're seeing. And then I would say in terms of trying to adapt to that, it's all over the board. There's no one right way, and there's no, you know, and then I think retailers, in terms of trying to create a better customer experience, are all differentiating themselves. So that's the challenge for both the consumer standpoint and also the retailer standpoint. So that's kind of what we're seeing in the marketplace. Huge uptick in contactless purchases, but I think we're still seeing a lot of disparity in how you execute against that.
I would say that just to piggyback off that, Ben, one of the big things that we're seeing, whether you're a QSR or a retailer, the big metric that everybody's pushing for is that last mile, that last piece of, I've arrived at the store, I've arrived at the restaurant. How do you know that I'm there? How do you know that you're ready? And we've been talking to a lot of customers that are, you know, they're very savvy, they have their own apps, but it's really still that last mile when a customer reaches their business. If the staff isn't aware and not communicated to effectively, the whole experience kind of suffers. So we need to be able to craft solutions that make it easier, not only for the customer, which is obviously a huge concern, but the staff as well. So a lot of our focus has been on how can we effectively communicate to the staff, whether it's through sensor technology or through a simple dashboard, that, hey, somebody's here, they're ready to pick up their stuff, because that metric of the amount of time that they spend waiting is the huge thing that we're seeing across all brands, where they want it to be seamless, they want it to be fast, they want it to be efficient.
Daniel, what are you seeing over in Europe, in Portugal in particular? Yep, you're muted.
Okay, no, it's okay. So people is going less to the stores. It's we can see it, but at the same time, people doesn't want to be home. All the opportunities people have to visit, to shop, they will do it. And when we noticed in the big amount of different experiments we are doing in retail, mostly in retail, is that if the government allows, people goes to the shopping malls. So we need to organize that. And that's a big concern also from the retailers to catch all the customers they can, because if they cannot sell because they don't have people, so if they have, even with a limited capacity, if they have the opportunity to sell, they don't want to lose 1 minute. So it's one of our jobs, it's to assure that we can maintain the capacity in the stores at the maximum level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to bring your company in on this because you guys do queue management, and queue management is one of those things that I think about in terms of waiting rooms for getting a driver's license or medical offices, that sort of thing. But because of the pandemic and the need to control capacity and everything else, it's really kind of found its way into retail as well. Have you seen a substantial uptick in activity for retail and related things?
It depends on the cultures. In our region, in Southern Europe, it's very common to have already queue management systems even in retail, not only in services. So the big difference is that now we are making people waiting outside instead to inviting them to enter in the store like it was in the past. So the big difference is that, and companies are still learning how to deal with that. We are making several experiments, and we noticed that we can put technology on to solve the problem, but technology is not the deal here. The deal here, it's psychology or sociology. It's more about human beings than technology, actually. So a strong combination between technology, communication, and some kind of freedom about not be rigid in the processes. At least right now, it's mandatory.
Ivy, your company works a lot with retail and QSR and with C-stores in particular. And you were saying ahead of us going live that you're seeing some activity in the C-store sector with retailers using curbside.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The objective really hasn't changed, right? Even if you look at a C-store, right, they're looking for ways to get those products, whether they're packaged goods or made to order food, into the hands of the consumer. But the path to get those has changed a lot. It's dramatically changed for the consumer. And actually what Daniel just said is very key. The technology has to work for the consumer, because the person is the one that's making that decision to buy. And in the C-store market, the forecourt and that parking lot or the gas pump area has always been this kind of open field of green. People have always said, oh, well, we could market to someone there. What's now happened is, how do we actually make a transaction that's beyond gas when they're standing at the pump? How do we turn, instead of trying to draw them into a store they may not want to go into, how do we make that so that they're actually going to walk out of that? They're going to walk away still with the product that they wanted in hand, but they will have never entered the store. And whether it be, that's that technology, what we're seeing with that in from a C-store perspective, but we're seeing it with a lot of retailers and with QSRs, is it's an extension of a large portfolio of technologies. So it's not just digital signage, it's extended Wi-Fi, it's extended sensors, it's extended IoT objects, in order to make that transaction happen in a way that the human, as Daniel said, and I think that's very key, is in a way that the person feels comfortable with. Because that's the piece of the puzzle that's gone away. It's no longer comfortable to walk into that store and relaxing, walk through the store, pick your items, and then go get it. You now want to make that transaction something where you don't have to do that.
Right. Brian McClines, for you, what are you seeing out there? And we were talking ahead of time about one of the big challenges is how does a retailer, unless they're a big multinational retailer or something like that, how do they know even where to start, who to talk to?
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge I think that we all face on this panel is any retailer knows where they can get a sign made, paper sign made. I truly believe that our industry needs to do better with the printing sign companies to convince them that digital signage is also another medium that they should support. I know that Fast Signs is one that does support digital. I know that, you know, the folks from on this call here all do digital, but not all of us are connected to those people making that decision at the retailer. So I really liked hearing what Ben and Rob had to say, as well as Daniel and Ivy, about how to make technology work with the psychology of a customer. And I think that retailers really need to embrace and understand, listen to these types of presentations and get on the phone with, or on a webinar with some of these people here to explain to them how it can be done simply. Because the problem that we all have, or retailers all have, is that their store is now a parking lot. I mean, that's a great statement of what you said, is the store is now the parking lot. Well, how do you differentiate your store from your competitor who could be 2 stores down in a shopping mall if the parking lot is still the same parking lot? Do you use orange cones with a stick? I know we joked about that, but yes, they do. And is that an experience that you want to give your customer? Because we all remember the days when we first started purchasing online. It was a terrible experience. You didn't know when your product was going to get to you. So you just went to the retail store. Now it's just flipped on its head. And now the experience buying from a store isn't so great versus whether you buy online. But not all people living in major cities can have products delivered to them. So they have to go and pick it up at the store. So how do you avoid some of those long queue lines that Ben showed? Because here in Chicago, you know, when the snow starts flying, I can guarantee you those lines of those people willing to stand for 20, 30 minutes out in the snow or rain, it's not going to be very good. They'll drive their car and stay in their heated car. But what do we do? What do the retailers do to change that experience? And I think they should all, you know, hire people from some of the experts out there in the QSR space that know how to do queue management and, you know, say, hey, how do you give that customer that experience that they want to come back? Because that's the key. How do you give the customer that experience they want to come back? And I think digital signage has a great way of impacting, at least entertaining the customer while they're standing, you know, they're sitting in their car, letting them know about the sale they've got coming up tomorrow or the next day. Or, hey, maybe you could upsell them. You know, Ivy said, you know, the C-stores have been doing it for years. While you're getting your gas, why don't you get a coffee? Why don't you get, you know, some chips or something like that? They do put those ads out there. I think retailers need to start learning from what restaurants have been doing for years and C-stores have been doing for years.
And I would assume one of the big values, and I'll put this out to everybody, is just simply that a screen, whether it's in an outdoor facing window or right outside, particularly in these early days when this is an unfamiliar process to a lot of people, is just explaining what to do. And, you know, where do I go? Do I call somebody? Do I just sit here? Where do I park? Do I need a ticket? You know, all that stuff. And it's got to be new to most people.
And each store is different. That's the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If each store is different, how do you know how to shop?
Yeah,
I absolutely. Sorry, Ivy.
No, go ahead.
I absolutely agree that setting the expectation around user behavior is of the utmost importance. Because let's face it, states, municipalities, because of the pandemic, the rules are changing constantly. It's a moving target every day for not only the brands but the customers themselves. So I think simple things like paper signs that then you can use your own device to either use a QR code, SMS, or maybe it's even you call 1-800 number and do IVR. That can get you into a rhythm where then you can use your own device. And then the queue management and the expectation setting and the user behavior can be kind of shifted or pushed in one direction or another using the digital signage. So, hey, I showed up to pick up my dinner. I showed up to pick up the goods that I just bought. I type in a QR or I snap a QR code real quick. I can see, all right, I got to put in, maybe it's my license plate number or the make and model of my car, or maybe it's the order number of what I'm there to pick up. That goes to back of the house. they see all the information there. But then the customer has that expectation of, okay, you saw me, you know that I'm here. And it's really valuable to the customer experience that they know that they've been heard. That coupled with outdoor signage that shows where you are in the queue, and can also say, hey, you're fifth in line, you're sixth in line, somebody's going to be out to get to you shortly. And it's that combination of using your own device with digital signage, all coupled in the same solution, that I think can be really powerful. And to kind of piggyback off what Ivy said earlier, it's not just the signage, it's the sensors, it's your own device, it's all these things that kind of culminate into building out a good customer experience.
Yeah, and I think with that, Dave, your commentary there is very key to something that I think in some respects we've forgotten about digital signage, which is, in the end, digital signage is an information communication tool. It doesn't matter if a lot of folks have used it for marketing. Many folks have used it for menus. We've all used it for promotional activities and brand reinforcement, and airlines and the travel industry have maximized it for information. But as we were saying before the webinar started, the regulations are changing daily, if not even hourly in some scenarios. Dave, you were commenting, you shut down because you had a slight spike a week ago. Being able to use a digital environment, whether it be traditional retail or QSR, C-store, or any of those places where digital goes, being able to use the flexibility of that just to help with the information delivery is a massive value proposition that I think people are now starting to see. And parking lots look the same. So if you're going to define a parking lot some way, whether it be for transactional or for brand reinforcement or just to get people through a queue, you got to do a lot of work, and digital actually can play a fairly large role in that, just because it changes the physical flat landscape of a parking lot. And I think there's a lot of value in that.
One of the things I heard on the last power hour that we did was some discussion that the property groups, the REITs and so on, who own a lot of these strip malls and shopping centers and power centers where there's a whole bunch of different retailers and a lot of parking spots, is the REITs themselves were helping with the infrastructure to enable digital to find its way into the parking areas, to the sidewalks and all that. Is that it pretty fundamental to whether this is going to work or not?
I'll jump in there first, I guess. Being with a company that does a large portfolio of technology, those types of requests are coming in fast and furious. How do I extend my? Owners of locations, even simple things, right? Small mom and pop shops who now want to sell on the sidewalk and need to have a mobile POS unit and don't have one that has 4G. So they need their Wi-Fi to go beyond the front door, right? And that's the commentary about infrastructure being so important. That's way beyond a digital sign, right? That's just making your business run in a location that it doesn't normally run. And what you're talking about there is even extending that farther, but finding value in the ownership group, which then gives value to the retailer, who can then give value to the customer. And so you've created that value proposition that in many respects has disappeared in the mall environment, right? Mall owners are dying in many respects just because stores are closing, or they're moving out, or they're moving to a cheaper property, or they're building their own, or whatever the reasons. And if the mall owner or if a property owner can find extended value to give to their tenants through that technology infrastructure, that makes it that much easier to deliver these types of digital experiences to the customer, who now is starting to expect them. Right. And that's the real key, is there's no longer a, ooh, that's cool factor. It's an expectation of the consumer.
I don't think that expectation of that consumer will go away. either, even when there is a vaccine. I think that habits have been formed. People are changing the way that they shop, and I don't believe that that will change, even when everybody has access to the vaccine in mid 2021. I think people, like another 6-7 months of this, I think people are going to absolutely get comfortable with picking up their products from the stores and such and expect it. And I think retailers will get much better at it, and they'll start figuring out how to market and make that experience better for the customer. It's going to be a must. Otherwise, they're going to just give way to, the online retailers only.
It's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, we a couple of years ago, agency side, we used to call this the Grubhub effect. People, they love not having to interact with humans. They'd rather just, I punch in some info on a website or an app and it just shows up. And I think the younger generations have already expected this for years. So I only see it becoming more commonplace, whether it's, like a locker system or a handoff from a service rep in the parking lot. I don't see it going away either. People just want that seamless customer experience that just works. And I think the folks that kind of figure it out and refine it the fastest, they're the ones that are going to win.
I'm curious about the technical complexity of all this. I can just imagine a kind of medium tier retailer listening to this and thinking, well, this sounds amazing, but dear God, it sounds complicated and expensive. And where do I even get started? It's one thing to have the very basics of curbside pickup or something like that. But if you want to start integrating queue management and text messaging and snapping QR codes and all the things you were talking about, like who do they work with, and like where does it start? Is it with an IT services company? Is it with a digital signage company? Is it with a company like Peerless that does the outside displays or the queue management? I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years and I'm not sure who I would talk to first.
Sure. That's a great question. And I do think that the industry from a platform perspective has gotten very mature when it comes to handling things from a full service platform, like a Twilio, for example, where they can handle the IVR, the SMS, et cetera. And those provide companies like us with a great infrastructure to start building these solutions on top of them. And I would actually say that on the lower end of the complexity scale is the SMS and the IVR and some of the stuff that we've built for our clients, which is more on a web application base. And I kind of answered this in the QA to a gentleman earlier. By building out a web application that's harvesting all that information and having the flexibility there, like I said, whether it's you want it to be your license plate, your order number, whatever the information that you need to get gathered to, there's a simple system that we can use on top of that infrastructure from a company like Twilio that just passes that to back of house. Now, how complex you want that to be, whether that's integrated with your point of sale system, whether you're doing kind of order confirmation, that's where it can ramp up pretty quickly in terms of complexity. But to simply show, hey, so-and-so's here, they're in parking space number 5, they're in a red Toyota, and their order number is 576. That I feel like is fairly simple. When the pendulum swings to the other side in terms of complexity, you start getting into native apps, you start getting into geofencing. We've definitely piloted that for a number of clients. When I first started with Scala about 4 years ago, we did a pilot for a pretty large brand where they were having issues with their couponing system. Customers were showing up to C-stores, they'd jam on the button to get the coupon to scan it at point of sale. And because these were sometimes in rural areas, we're having difficulty making that a quick, fast experience. So we'd set a geofence around the store. When they break that geofence, we'd start auto-populating that coupon so it would load. So this is stuff that's been around for a while, but it really hasn't started to come to fruition and seen these very acute use cases until customers and clients and brands got pushed to do it because of the pandemic.
Ben, your company works a lot with QSR, so you're kind of ahead of the curve, so to speak, in terms of customer experience and serving outside of the normal environments of a store. What all is involved? Is it what's Rob saying, or do you see it a different way?
I do see it similar to what Rob's saying. Just for a higher level, approach, I mean, it's important that whatever you do, it's kind of open-ended and you have open APIs that allows for data exchanges. So that's really the key, because then you can incorporate with either the client, meaning QSR retailer systems, or another third party. And so you don't, if you come at it from that approach that I'm gonna play nice with other technologies and enable my client's experience, my customer experience, then I think they're able to piece that together. So, you know, things like recognizing the customer at a drive-through, being able to personalize the menu, being able to transact and things like that. That's, to your point, David, that's all happening at QSR or starting to. But there's probably, you know, 3 or 4 different vendors in that process that they have to come together. And so that's where I would say, you know, open APIs and being able to exchange data easily in real time, you know, just like online. You know, you get an ad call back on online in milliseconds. You have to be able to do that in real time at the point of transaction or at the curbside pickup or wherever it may be. So
do you see that kind of absence of friction, the seamlessness that drive-throughs aspire to, and you know that represents anywhere from 65 to these days maybe 100% of their business? Does that seamlessness need to apply to a curbside pickup scenario or pickup window scenario that's not QSR, or does it just have to be a little more efficient than, you know, pulling up and phoning somebody and saying, "Hi, I'm Bob," and then they spend half an hour trying to find your invoice?
I think we touched on it here. The easier you can make it for the customer to transact with you, the more business you're going to do. So where I see non-QSRs, like retailers, look at it is like, help me reduce my wait time when somebody shows up at my store from 8 to 12 minutes to 2 to 3 minutes. It's a huge focus for some of our clients right now. So, you know, I think, and somebody said it earlier, it's like, it's hard to change a parking lot. And so it's not going to happen overnight. So how can we use signage and technology to, with the existing infrastructure, and then down the road, what you're starting to see, and David, we might have seen this in a previous power hour, but you're starting to see QSRs and retailers start to think, okay, knowing that this is happening, how do I change my layouts, you know, and how do I make it easier to transact? And, you know, what does my real estate look like and things like that. But for the given period, I absolutely think reducing transaction time is going to be a huge area of focus in this new kind of contactless environment.
Yeah, that brings up an interesting question. Obviously, with some QSR operations, those that don't normally have drive-through are doing all kinds of things. They're coming up with new designs and everything else. And I've even read about temporary marquee tents in the parking lots with somebody with a mobile POS system there and everything else. But for a more conventional retailer, whether they're a paint store, apparel store, shoes, whatever it may be, are there things they could do to actually redesign their store, or is it really just about enabling some sort of, you know, pull in here and we'll deal with you?
I do think there are things, I mean, or certainly from a redesign, if that's a possibility, but even short term, I think you know, it's having a handheld device that can transact at the curbside. And I think it was Ivy that was talking about is taking that POS transaction out to the customer and doing it more quickly, so they're not having somebody run back and forth. Some of the things that Rob mentioned is helping on the back end. So how about I've placed an order, and as a customer, I'm willing to share my information so that when I get there, it's going to be ready and I don't have to wait 10 minutes. And so if I'm willing to share, say, my location information, I give the retailer a heads up, I'm 10 minutes away, 5 minutes away, and that can all be done in an automated fashion, then I know they're valuing my time, and hopefully the order's gonna be ready when I get there. So I think there's things we can do on the back end that don't involve a layout change, but yet can still speed up that transaction time potentially.
Daniel, does it help if you are already a retailer of some kind who's using something like queue management technology? You've already kind of, as you said, it in Southern Europe, maybe it's already something familiar. Does that speed things along? And remember your mute button. He didn't remember his mute button.
We are having several experiences in different markets in North America, South America, Europe, Africa. Funny thing is that there is several aspects that are similar in all the experiments we are making. And it depends on the culture, on the age of the customers. If you have, for example, customers with a big range of age span, it will be hard to, for example, to implement a technology that depends only on smartphones, for example. So we always need a plan B. But the most interesting things we are doing about queue management is in shopping malls with and we are working with some shopping malls with more than 300 shops, from small shops, 100 square meters, to several thousands of square meters. And we are making like a customer journey for all the malls. So it's an integrated experience where the customer can, the visitor can just scan a QR code, just say which stores he wants to visit, and the application can manage the flow or the journey for the customer depending on the queues, for example. So this kind of technologies, they are growing fast. The results are also so make us dream in a near future, but there are still several situations you need to prevent. Especially you always need a plan B for people that unfortunately it happens, unfortunately or not, it's cultural. So people that they just don't share the data. For example, here in Europe we have a big issue when we want to take care about data or recognize people. There is related with data protection. So there is several barriers we need to cross to create a really good customer touchless experience.
Brian, I'm curious from your perspective, when you have retailers who are thinking about, okay, we're going to put big digital displays outside. You're with a company that does all kinds of ruggedized outdoor ready displays. What do they need to think about? Because I suspect this is entirely new to them.
Yeah, it is entirely new to them because, you know, they have come up with some challenges getting power out to the location in the parking lots. Now you have to work with the owners of the building. I think that what you were talking about before about QSRs completely looking to revamp their drive-through experience, and I think that the old bank drive-through is becoming the new. It's almost like the Brady Bunch. You know, it's the retail store, it's the bank, it's the QSR. They're all going to end up looking alike. And if you're not going into the store, why does the store need to be in a strip mall? Why don't they then just locate their store like a out store, which would be a restaurant, and then have the drive-through experience be there for the customer? Then they can, you know, plan for and have the electric. They can have the content, because you have to get content out there, and then have the information out there and have the ruggedized display. But it does take a little bit more to think through, and you get the right people involved. But, you know, as the QSR restaurants have experienced, and Stratacache has really led the way on that with what they did at McDonald's, that, you know, the experience is fantastic. They've upsold customers at the drive-through by confirming their orders. If you could do that at the parking lot at the retailer and upsell the customer as they're waiting. It won't take them any longer to, add an extra item to their shopping list. I think it would be fantastic. And, they just need to plan ahead, and then have the hardware put out there, and they're going to see a much better result. And they'll be able to confirm. You could even ask the customer right then and there. With some of the technology that was talked about on this, you could actually have somebody just with their phone interact with the sign that's right there and say, how's your experience going? Plus or minus, just so they can have a live feeling of how customers are experiencing or they're feeling, because they want to know how that's going. Maybe it's a family with 4 people in the car and they're all yelling, and I just can't sit here any longer and wait for this. But
Never happens.
you need to know that. Yeah, never happens.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Brian. When somebody's waiting, it's not like they're going to be sitting there. Either they're yelling at their kids in the back seat, or they're going to be looking at Words with Friends on their phone or something. They're not going to be sitting there waiting, looking at the queue the whole time. So having that option on the outdoor board, maybe it's you're subsidizing the cost of the hardware and the software by putting non-endemic advertisement up there. Maybe it's a bunch of messaging around up and coming events or specials, but having that ability to give you something to look at, even if it's utilitarian information like the wait time. I think having that ability to message to the customer outdoor, and I think it's great too to say like, oh shoot, my wife ordered X. This happens to me all the time. Go to the store, get these 5 things. While you're driving, you get 10 text messages of, oh, I forgot to ask you about this or this or this, add this to it. So you think you're a good husband, you're sitting there and you're waiting, and then you go, shoot, I looked at all these text messages. So how great would it be able to snap a QR code, interact with that signage and say, add this, this, and this to my cart. It's going to increase your wait time, but it's that better customer experience. It's going to keep you coming back.
So you could pull into a slot and it would say, Rob, check your damn phone.
I need one of those to follow me everywhere.
Or Rob has to get out of the car and go into the store for that one item. After he picked it.
Yes, and it's usually something really embarrassing that I have to buy.
Well, that would be bad.
Is there? Go ahead, Brian.
No, I was going to say I think the one of the things that's very interesting is there's one of the keys to this is how you implement it, and it's not how you implement it from a what's the customer interaction, but it's literally how do you implement it. And Brian talked about power, and we've talked about extended Wi-Fi, and we're talking about digital signage and CMSs. Bringing all of those pieces together and actually making sure that they work right. And that's a piece of the puzzle that I think we're, to the question of the challenge of where do you start with the objective, because we all talk about ROI and ROO and all those things, but the reality is that return on objective is part of the reason this is working. Right? There's an objective of the consumer to get stuff safely, and there's an objective of the retailer to get that stuff to the consumer safely. And so we're trying to fill the gap between the two. And it's, if you focus on the objective to start, you're going to probably get the objective right in the end. If you focus on the transaction or the minuscule pieces and parts that we've been talking about, and by the way, you have to talk about those at some point in time, right? You have to understand each of those components, the physical enclosure, the screens that you're going to use, the sensors, the Wi-Fi, the power, right? But you don't have to lose the thought process of what you're trying to get to in the end in that process. So budgets always play in, technology, infrastructure plays in, all those things play in. But for those folks who are trying to decide, where do I start with what your objective is. I'll use somebody that's in our area. It's in probably many of your areas. C-store in Casey's General Store. You pull into their pump, they have a simple printed message right now that says, you want delivered to the pump, go on the app, order what you want, we'll bring it out to you. Right? That's creating a behavior. The objective is to get the food that's inside out to the pump. It's creating a behavior. Now we can take that to the next step. What we're talking about here is, how do I make that a better experience? How do I make it easier? How do I use Daniel's technology to make sure I know where I'm at in the queue? How do I upsell because I bought 2 slices of pizza and I forgot a drink, right? And so don't lose sight of the original objective, because that hasn't changed. It hasn't changed for the consumer or the retailer. The path to it has changed dramatically. But that objective hasn't changed at all.
Just before I ask another question here, just a reminder to the audience that there's a Q&A function on the bottom strip if you want to add a question in there. We've got 4 sitting there right now. Please do so. We'll jump into Q&A in about 5 minutes or so. One thing I wanted to ask the group in general is kind of play the devil's advocate here. Often, and I've been in these meetings where the CMO or the CEO said, well, this digital signage stuff sounds great, but why couldn't we just do all of what you've all been describing for the last 40 minutes or so on just a smartphone? Why do I need digital displays as part of the mix?
I'll go first, I guess. So I would say 2 things. One is, Daniel said it best, plan B. Not everybody has a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole lot of people who think everybody has a smartphone, but there's a whole lot of people without one. I think that's number 1. I think number 2 is, as trusted as that device is, if you can find a way to take someone's attention away from that device, you're probably going to win.
Yeah, it's all about the
And just
experience. And I mean, I just had that yesterday with an ER, having to figure out how to schedule an appointment and then let them know that I'm there to bring my daughter in. And then, oh, can I get in? Can I not? The text message that they were doing from the phone was adequate, but it wasn't great. And if there was a sign that could tell me that I'm next in line, or, I mean, there's cars scattered around the parking lot at a hospital. You didn't know who's next or what, you didn't even know if you were still in queue. And it took 45 minutes just for them to tell me what was happening. And, at the same time, you're somewhat, at that situation, you're somewhat panicking because you're there for a reason. And, I think that, retail stores, the better experience, I think that's the most important thing, is the better we give the customer the experience, they'll come back, they'll shop more. And technology has to blend with multiple different people and their level of technology. And that last mile that was said, I can't remember who said it, that really is important. And it's the person that makes that last mile, from that store coming out there, that they just trained maybe yesterday to bring the product out to the car. They need to not just, drop off a box at that last section where they're handing this, hey, I confirm that your order's correct, this and that. That's that human factor that needs to be there to make sure that you feel as you drive away, so we don't have the Joe Pesci moment that you always get in the drive-through. You just want to make sure that you actually do have a good experience. You get home and you don't go and call and go, I'm missing something. That last mile where that person says, I confirm this, it's good, you're good, go have a great day.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. I wasn't sure where you were going with the Joe Pesci moment. I didn't know if there was going to be a knife with the hoof kind of comment there with the Goodfellas. But anyway, not everybody's going to have great connectivity. You might be in the middle of nowhere. The Wi-Fi might stink. And having the ability to have digital signage that can be dynamic, that can be adjusted by maybe somebody on site if they have the right permissions. I don't know, I'm sure everybody here has gone through managing a website, or God forbid, managing a native app. A lot of our big brands, they have third-party people that are developing their native app, so they don't even have control of it. Then you get to QSRs that use a loyalty, like a white labeled loyalty native app, they might get 1 or 2 updates that they get a year. So imagine with, again, I mentioned the kind of the moving target of the local municipalities or local government changing the rules on you, and you happen to comply. Oh my gosh, digital signage is going to be way easier to update, maintain, get to that right message to the right person than I have to go to my webmaster who might be on vacation or somebody else, or my group of developers to update a native app or a website. It's just quicker, it's easier, it's more dynamic, it can be done. This is the other cool thing too. It's like the website is in a native app, while you do have levels of sophistication around personalization, knowing who they are, where they are maybe in your sales funnel, with people that are in real life, in brick and mortar, that sensor technology coupled with things like computer vision, you can get even more granular with the messaging. So it really allows for that smarter signage, really, and activating the parking lot in a way that is, I would say, even more impactful than just picking up your phone.
Daniel, I'm interested in your perspective here at how fundamental displays are to, you were describing the shopping mall earlier. Can you just do everything off a phone, or do you really need the displays as kind of the complementary instructional communications piece?
I believe we need communication. Doesn't matter how it is, of course. 21st century digital signage has a special role. But when we arrive to a space for the first time, or to a space that changed the way to serve people, the first thing we do is to try to understand how the things work there. So digital signage has a main role here. At the same time, it can help us in the plan B and C. So if there is difficulties to put all the people using smartphones, so we need to find another ways to register customers in a queue, or to the customers to say I'm here. So because even for the smarter, not smarter, even for the people that is a tech addict that uses smartphones all the day, sometimes the battery goes down. So we need to have another ideas, another solutions. So, and we can go back in time, and we can just save some ideas or behaviors from the past. We can use paper tickets for the people that doesn't use the smartphone. It's old, it's paper, okay, but it works. One touch and it works. If people he's afraid to touch, I don't believe that idea. But in reality, the numbers doesn't show that. People prefers to touch in a kiosk than to talk with a person. Well, you put a sanitizer next to the kiosk, and it solves the problem. So the screens and the digital communication has a great impact here, and it's needed.
Great, thank you. Marcella, we've got about 7 minutes left. Did you want to fire through some of the questions that have come in?
Definitely. Kelly says, as a traditional sign company who has moved to marketing and selling digital signage to small businesses, it is a difficult sell due to budget, getting a grasp on the basics of infrastructure, CMS, and content creation. The selling cycle is lengthy. And she asks, what success stories can you speak to about selling into small business?
I think I'll take that first. I think small business, I think one of the success stories that comes with small businesses today is that the technology is now an expectation, which means it's an easier conversation to have around the value proposition of content. We actually haven't talked a lot about content here. We've talked about promotional or using the time. I think the success story there is about bringing them. I'm not one to productize a lot, but at the same time, I think the small businesses are looking for ways to get the whole package. They don't want to, we talked earlier about where do I start? They don't want to go figure out, what does Brian bring to the table, and what does Rob bring to the table, and what does IV bring to the table, and what they want somebody to show up and say, here you go. This is what it is. And this is what, here's 3 options that give you these 3 or 4 different outcomes that are key to what we know in your world, right? Now that's the fast signs conversation, right, Brian? From that perspective, I mean, it's a it's a very narrow rope to walk, because there are organizations who want to highly customize but don't understand the real budget investment to do that, versus folks who don't know how to make the budget investment at the front end, but that's where those packages can make a huge difference. And it doesn't mean you have to be rigid, right? It doesn't mean you can't make adjustments for certain customers or based on need. It means give them something to start with, because then they don't have to go through the ocean that is technology and digital signage and AV and on and on and on.
Anybody else want to field that?
Yeah, I agree with Ivy. I think that there needs to be A, B, and C. There's different levels of engagement that customers can have and jump into, and it doesn't have to be the whole ball of wax. It could be just, right, hey, I want to flip pictures. I want to get this information out to my customers, or maybe I need to have that back and forth communication. So as long as they can see steps that they can make and they can go to a trusted source, that's what they need. They need a trusted source in the digital signage community that they can, hear from and say, hey, this is what we did at this level of store. This is what we did at this medium level store. This is what we did at a mom and pop type of a store. And so they can understand, because nobody wants to be the guinea pig. Nobody wants to be the first to try something, because there's risk in that. So we need to have more success stories out there that we all share into the industry.
Marcel, I saw a great question there from Jeff Wismer, something I was going to ask, but he's beat me to it.
Jeff says, have city sign permit bylaws become any issue for anyone to deal with on a project, particularly for electronic signage?
Yes. Is that a good enough answer? Next. Yes. I think it has become a conversation, at least. Luckily, the outdoor LED manufacturers dealt with it before a lot of us had to deal with it. But at the same time, I think there's at least conversations about it, depending on where you're going. We see it, and then Ben, you might see it as well. We see it more with QSR drive-through, where that drive-through is facing an area that might be residential, or it might be an office park, and they don't want the sign blare, what they deem as, streaming into the light of that sign streaming into their area. But it's a concern. I don't know that it's as much of a concern in retail, because most of those areas are going to be fairly well lit already. And so the addition of a traditional digital sign or signs is not going to change that light environment as much. But that's kind of a perspective versus maybe a factual outcome.
I assume that if you're going to be looking at this, that a best practice is to ask those questions really early on as to what's allowed, and don't assume that because you could do this in Cincinnati that you could even do it in Cleveland.
Right. Or even that you can do it on 10th Street versus 20th Street, because those might be two very different areas of town.
Yeah, you do have to get involved in what the city requirements are, town requirements. Every one of them has them. Some of them have height restrictions. It isn't even like it's height restrictions. So you definitely have to, if you're going to put a digital sign outside, you do need to consult that local town's ordinances and get them on board. Now, every town is suffering for tax revenue, so I think they're going to green light these things a lot faster than they have in the past. So just remind them of that as tax revenue.
We probably have time for one more, Marcella.
All right.
One quick answer.
Paul says, thank you to Daniel Souza for mentioning a plan B. Everything in the discussion has been around the use of smartphones. What options do you see for customers without smartphones, or for locations that don't have cellular service? I guess you guys kind of answered that already, huh?
Yeah, well, we did. True enough.
How's another one?
Well, do you have time? You're the boss.
One more. One more. John says, when implementing a larger sign for crew, best practice to identify a customer, name, numbers, etc. What about privacy concerns?
I can try and answer that, Dave. I mean, obviously, a mobile app, just being able to, in terms of privacy with the mobile app, you're asking the customer to opt in. It's permission based, things like that. So that's one way. Another way would be to have them opt in when they arrive. So I think that all this needs to be permission based, and allowing that two-way communication. And then capturing, it needs to be a value equation in terms of capturing my name, my ID, things like that. You need to be able to return, hey, a quicker speed of service, or your order will be ready quicker next time, or just make it more seamless. That's really goes back to the value.
All right, this is a great discussion. Thanks to every one of you for taking the time. I know you're all super busy, and this just eats a part of your day. Marcella, I'll let you close things off.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our speakers today. And thank you, listeners, for joining today's webinar, Digital Signage Power Hour, the parking lot is the new store. Special thank you to StrataCash for sponsoring the Digital Signage Power Hour series. This recording will be available on avixa.org/webinars within about 5 business days, and your 1 RU credit will be applied to your transcripts within 5 to 7 business days. If you have any trouble, please contact webinars@avixa.org. A huge thank you to Ben, Dave, and guests for providing insights into why retail and food services have accelerated digital transformation plans and pushed messaging outside their doors. We hope everyone enjoyed. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.